Imagine a place with no microphones, no seminaries, no temples, only a song echoing through jungle streams, not in Hindi, not in English, but in ancient Hebrew, a language the world thought had vanished from their blood. But here on the misty border of India and Myanmar, a forgotten tribe with no nation on paper sings the songs of Abraham. They have no Torah scrolls, no rabbis, no printed Bibles, only memory passed from grandfather to grandson, from a mother's dream to a grandmother's lullaby. They call themselves Bnei Manasseh, the children of Manasseh. At first the world dismissed them, scholars scoffed, governments ignored. But then in 2005 something changed. Rabbi Shlomo Amar, chief Sephardic rabbi of Israel, officially recognized them as descendants of the lost tribe of Manasseh, a people scattered since 722 BC, now remembered. And in that moment, a prophecy buried beneath 27 centuries of silence began to stir. But how did they get here across mountains, empires, and exile and still know who they are? Who taught them to keep the Sabbath? Who told them the story of the Red Sea without ever owning a Bible? And why, just when the world forgot the tribes are, they returning just as Ezekiel and Isaiah foretold? This is no legend. This is living prophecy. And you are about to step inside its unfolding. Don't blink, because what comes next is a journey across 27 centuries and 5 empires, tracing how a tribe once thought extinct is now returning to the promised land as if the Bible itself is being lived out in our time. Part 1. Bnei Manasseh, the lost sons of Israel, sing again. There are places on earth so remote, so tucked away in the folds of jungle and mountain that cartographers once labeled them terra incognita, unknown land. In the northeastern corner of India, beyond the high ridges of Manipur and the misty hills of Mizoram, lies such a place. Far from Jerusalem, far from synagogues, far from the world's memory of ancient Israel. Yet, it is here that a whisper from the Book of Kings has somehow survived the rise and fall of empires. And it sings, not metaphorically, literally. They sing in Hebrew, not modern Israeli Hebrew, but a dialect steeped in ancient rhythm passed not by professors but by grandmothers and shepherds. They don't learn from Torah scrolls because they never had any. They don't quote verses from books because for centuries there were no books. Instead, they remember. This community calls themselves Bnei Manasseh, the children of Manasseh, a name that means little to most today, but in biblical genealogy it's seismic. Because Manasseh was one of the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom of Israel, the very tribes that vanished after the Assyrian conquest in 722 BC. And for more than 2 millennia, their fate was a mystery. Some said they were lost forever. Others believed they would one day return. No one expected them to be found here nestled between bamboo forests and rice terraces, keeping the Sabbath, lighting candles and reciting blessings in Hebrew. For years, no one believed them. Not seriously. Their traditions were seen as cultural curiosities at best or accidental imitations at worst. How could these people with dark skin, Asian features, and no synagogue possibly be related to ancient Israelites? But something didn't fit the imitation theory. They knew the Shema, the ancient Jewish declaration of faith. They practiced circumcision on the 8th day. They avoided pork, observed ritual purity, and mourned the destruction of the temple, a temple none of their ancestors had ever physically seen. And their oral traditions included names Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, names that had been passed down through hundreds of generations without written record. It was more than tradition, it was identity, and that identity could no longer be ignored. In 2005, the unthinkable happened. Rabbi Shlomo Amar, the Sephardic chief rabbi of Israel, issued an official declaration recognizing the Bnei Manasseh as descendants of the lost tribe of Manasseh. Not converts, not cultural enthusiasts, but blood-linked members of the ancient house of Israel. The lost had not been lost, only scattered. This recognition opened the gates for Aliyah, the right of return to Israel. And slowly, members of the community began to make their way back to the land they had never seen, but had always called home in their hearts. Their journey stunned many, especially as DNA studies began to show distant Middle Eastern ancestry, enough to spark serious interest, if not certainty. But beyond the genetics, it was the unbreakable continuity of their faith that made the greatest impression. Then something terrifying happened. In 2023, violence broke out in Manipur. Ethnic tensions erupted into chaos, and the Bene Manasseh found themselves once again caught in the crossfire of a conflict they didn't cause. Churches were torched, homes were burned. Ancient oral traditions never written down were suddenly at risk of being erased. It was as if history had circled back to test them again, just like it did in Samaria, just like in exile, just like in every land they passed through on their long march through the centuries. But this time the cameras were watching, and prophecy watchers around the world took notice. Was this another signal, another birth pang before a greater gathering? Some say yes, others dismiss it. But the fact remains, a people who had no scrolls kept the Sabbath. A tribe without maps remembered Zion, and a generation raised without a written Bible still cried out to the God of Abraham by name. Now pause for a moment, because this leads us to a question that's far more personal than historical. If a people in the jungle without infrastructure, without books, without international support, without formal education, if they can preserve their faith across 700 years of exile, what's our excuse for forgetting ours in just a generation who's truly lost them or us? Next, we'll retrace their extraordinary migration, a path stretching from ancient Samaria through Persia, Tibet, and Burma, all the way to India. A journey that mirrors prophecy, a journey that defies logic, a journey that just might explain where the rest of the lost tribes are hiding. Because if Manasseh has returned, who's next? Part 2. From Samaria to the Himalayas, a journey of exile. History does not forget the conquerors. It etches their names into stone. Tiglath-Pileser, Sargon II, kings of Assyria, men who commanded armies and swallowed kingdoms whole. But what about the conquered? What about the ones who disappeared not because they died, but because they wandered? In the year 722 BC, the northern kingdom of Israel fell to the Assyrian Empire. It wasn't just a military defeat, it was an erasure. 10 tribes, including Manasseh, were uprooted, families split, priests silenced. Thousands marched eastward in chains. And after that, silence. The Bible gives us fragments of what happened, hints in 2 Kings 17. The Assyrians, known for forced relocations, scattered the Israelites throughout the empire in Hala in Gozan, by the Habor River, and in the cities of the Medes. But beyond that, a void, as if the page was torn from history. And yet, what if the page wasn't missing, only misplaced? Somewhere beyond the archives of empires, there existed another record, not in ink, but in song, ritual, and memory. And that record leads us to a forgotten trail carved through centuries. From Samaria, the northern capital of ancient Israel, the exiles were moved into Persian territories, what we now call Iran and western Afghanistan. But they did not stay. Generation after generation, they moved again, sometimes pushed by conquest, sometimes pulled by survival. They headed east, and that is where the story takes a surprising turn. In the highlands of Tibet, oral traditions speak of strangers, people who lived differently, who followed strange customs, and had sacred fire rituals unlike anything else in the region. Was this Manasseh wandering beyond Babylon's borders? From Tibet, the trail continues southward into what is today northern Burma, now called Myanmar. And here the terrain shifts dramatically. The flatlands give way to steep jungle hills, mist-wrapped mountains, and deep, shadowy valleys. It's in this region that the descendants of Manasseh claim to have arrived at a sacred place, a hidden place, a shelter from war, oppression, and oblivion. They call it Shinlung. To outside ears, Shinlung may sound like folklore, a myth woven to explain a migration no one can document. But to the Bene Manasseh, it is sacred history. They believe their ancestors dwelled in a great cave, a refuge after generations of wandering, a place of rest, a place where they remembered who they were. And here's the twist. In their songs and oral stories, Shinlung is described not just as a physical cave, but as a spiritual sanctuary, almost like a second Sinai, a place where identity was not taught, it was restored. In Shinlung, we remembered the name of the God of Israel. In Shinlung, we passed on the law of Moses. In Shinlung, we waited for the time to return. Think about that. A people scattered from their homeland, journeying across mountains and jungles for centuries, and somehow in a cave in the mist-covered hills of Burma, they reignite the flame of faith. No scrolls, no temple, no priests, only memory and covenant. It is tempting to dismiss Shinlung as symbolic, but even symbols have power, especially in biblical tradition. Think of Noah's Ark on Ararat. Think of Elijah in the cave on Horeb. Think of Moses hiding in the cleft of the rock while God's glory passed by. In the Bible, caves are not just holes in the earth. They are places of preservation, encounter, and calling. So what if Shinlung was not a pause in the exile, but a pivot? What if it was God's appointed shelter, a hidden cleft, where the remnant of Manasseh would be preserved until the time of restoration? Eventually, the journey continued down into the northeastern territories of India. Mizoram, Manipur, isolated, marginalized, unrecognized, but alive. And as they settled into these remote hill regions, the people carried with them more than cultural memory. They carried a spiritual map. They kept observing the Sabbath. They continued ritual practices like kosher slaughter, family purity laws, and festivals resembling Passover and Sukkot, though modified over time. They believed they were waiting for something. Some said they were waiting for the time when the world would remember them. Others said they were waiting for a sign that the journey was nearly complete. That sign came in 2005 when the chief rabbi of Israel declared them part of the lost house. And that sign turned urgent in 2023 when their homes and places of worship were set ablaze. Like a second Exodus, the fire wasn't the end, it was the signal. But here is what no historian can fully explain. How did they preserve their identity through all of this? How did they keep the memory of Israel without Israel? How did they pass on the God of Abraham, the law of Moses, the hope of return, without a Bible, without a priest, without even knowing if they were right? Unless someone was preserving them. Because if God remembered them across 2,700 years and 5 civilizations, if his hand guided them from Samaria to Shinlung through Persia, Tibet, and the jungles of Burma, then that means the covenant is not forgotten. It means the promise is still alive. It means the scattered can be gathered. Next, we'll explore why the tribe of Manasseh matters so deeply in biblical prophecy, from the double blessing of Jacob to their mysterious role in Revelation. Because if God sealed their name in the book, then their return may be a signal that the end of exile for all Israel is closer than we think. Part 3. Manasseh's inheritance and the seal of the end times. In the eyes of men, Manasseh is often overlooked, a name whispered briefly in genealogies, then forgotten in the noise of greater kings and louder prophets. But in the eyes of God, the story is never that simple. To understand why the return of Manasseh matters, we must go back not to Mizoram or Manipur, but to the windswept hills of ancient Egypt, where Joseph ruled as second only to Pharaoh. Joseph had 2 sons there, Manasseh and Ephraim. Manasseh was the firstborn, strong, quiet, dutiful. His name means causing to forget, because Joseph said, "God has made me forget all my trouble." And yet when Jacob, the patriarch of Israel, Joseph's father, came to bless his grandsons, he did something shocking. He crossed his arms. Ephraim the younger received the greater blessing. Manasseh the elder was passed over, not because of failure, not because of sin, but for a reason buried deep in mystery. Still, Jacob did something equally profound. He didn't just bless the boys, he adopted them. He said, "Your 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, are mine, just as Reuben and Simeon are mine." Genesis 48:5. This was no small act. In doing this, Jacob gave Joseph a double portion of inheritance. 1 tribe became 2. And Manasseh, though overshadowed by his younger brother, became the head of a distinct and honored tribe of Israel. He was not just a footnote in Joseph's legacy. He was a covenant bearer and heir to something larger than himself. Over time, however, something strange happened. In the Old Testament, the tribe of Dan was often mentioned as an equal among the 12. But in Revelation 7, when John lists the 12 tribes of those who are sealed, Dan is missing. And in Dan's place, Manasseh. It's as if the hand that crossed over him in Egypt that once placed him second now lifts him back into view at the very end of the age. Let's pause here. Why would the Bible remove a whole tribe from the final sealing? Why Dan? The early church fathers, along with rabbinic tradition, offer several theories. Dan is often linked with idolatry, the tribe that introduced graven images into the land, Judges 18. Some even speculated that the Antichrist could arise from Dan's lineage. Whether symbolic or literal, the message is clear. Unfaithfulness removes you from the list. And yet in Dan's absence, it is not Ephraim who fills the void. It is Manasseh, the quiet one, the forgotten heir, the one who never rebelled, but was nearly erased by history anyway. Now in the final book of the Bible, his name is engraved among the 144,000, the sealed ones who stand with the Lamb on Mount Zion. What does this mean? It means that God sees what men overlook. It means that while history lifts up the ambitious prophecy, remembers the faithful. And Manasseh's reappearance in Revelation is no accident, it's a signal. In a time when many compromise, when many fall away, the Spirit is calling those who endured quietly to rise. And what better symbol of that than a tribe who has literally wandered in obscurity for 700 years, yet somehow never forgot the God of their fathers. There's another layer. The name Manasseh, which once meant God made me forget my trouble, now carries a prophetic irony. Because in Revelation, it is not Manasseh who is forgotten. It is Manasseh who is sealed, marked, remembered, preserved. And that's the twist no one saw coming. Think of it this way. In the first Exodus, 12 tribes entered the land. In the final gathering, 12 tribes are sealed for the Lamb. But not all names make the cut, and not all losses are final. Some names are restored by the sheer power of obedience and faith. And if Manasseh, the tribe history ignored, is remembered by God, what does that say about you? What does that say about every faithful heart that feels forgotten? Because sometimes it is the quiet loyalty of the outcast that heaven exalts. Sometimes it's not the loudest tribes or the strongest warriors who endure, but the ones who never gave up their name. Manasseh did not ask for the spotlight. But in the last days, it seems the spotlight finds him. In the next chapter, we'll uncover how this pattern of lost tribes returning is not unique to Manasseh. From Ethiopia to Spain, from Nigeria to China, echoes of Israel's exiles are rising again. And what's unfolding may not just be a return to the land, but a return to identity itself. Because if Manasseh was never lost in God's eyes, maybe no one truly is. Part 4. Not just Manasseh, the global awakening of the tribes. Manasseh is not alone. What we're witnessing today is not an isolated return, but a global pattern, mysterious, scattered, and yet strangely synchronized. Across deserts, mountains, jungles, and oceans, fragments of ancient Israel are stirring. For centuries, these communities were ignored, dismissed, or written off as legends. But now the stories are converging, and Isaiah's words echo louder than ever before. He will raise a banner for the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judah from the four quarters of the earth. Isaiah 11:12. Start in Africa, in the highlands of Ethiopia, where a people known as Beta Israel, the house of Israel, practiced a version of Mosaic law for over 2,000 years. They kept the Sabbath. They slaughtered animals according to kosher rules. They lit candles. They recited prayers in a language called Ge'ez, which preserves ancient Semitic rhythms. For generations, Ethiopian Jews were called heretics, outcasts, even accused of being a fabrication. But in Operation Moses 1984 and Operation Solomon 1991, the Israeli government launched emergency airlifts to rescue them from war and famine. Thousands were flown overnight, not for tourism, not for anthropology, but because they were recognized as Jews. This was not charity, it was prophecy in motion. Now shift westward. In Spain and Portugal, hundreds of years after the Inquisition, descendants of so-called New Christians, the crypto-Jews, are rediscovering their past. They were families who had hidden their Jewish identity for generations, lighting Sabbath candles in secret, whispering Hebrew blessings in cellars, eating unleavened bread behind locked doors. In Latin America, Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, DNA tests and family records are confirming what many had only suspected. They are the children of those who fled the fires of Europe, and like Manasseh, they never fully forgot. Their faith may have changed shape, their prayers may have been muted, but something survived, and now it is waking up. Cross into West Africa, Nigeria, where among the Igbo people many believe they descend from the tribes of Israel. They perform circumcisions on the 8th day. They follow dietary laws. They speak of a singular god named Chineke, who shares eerie parallels with the Hebrew El Elyon. Scholars argue, critics doubt, but one thing is undeniable. They've never stopped calling themselves Israelites. In recent decades, movements have surged among the Igbo reclaiming Hebrew identity, observing feasts, even returning to Israel. Could these be descendants of God Zebulun or Naphtali? We cannot say for certain. But their conviction is not a fad, it is inheritance awakened. Then to the East China, where the city of Kaifeng once hosted a thriving Jewish community for over 1,000 years. The Kaifeng Jews built a synagogue, kept Torah scrolls, and preserved customs that eventually faded under imperial pressure and political change. But now in the 21st century, some descendants are stepping forward again, studying Hebrew, embracing forgotten roots, seeking return. It is happening in Afghanistan too, in communities long thought wiped out, buried beneath centuries of war. Whispers of Hebrew songs in unlikely places. Echoes of ancient prayers spoken by people who don't know why they say them. What's going on? Is this anthropology, a global identity crisis, or is something deeper happening? Here's the twist. This isn't a movement of nostalgia. It's not about preserving old culture like artifacts in a museum. It's about prophecy being fulfilled slowly, unexpectedly, quietly, exactly as foretold. These awakenings follow the biblical map laid out in Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and Revelation. God is not just calling his people back to a land, he is calling them back to a name, to a covenant. Geography matters, but it's not the whole story. Because when God gathers his people, he doesn't begin with a passport. He begins with a mark on the soul. That's why he can call a child in the Nigerian jungle, a grandmother in Brazil, a boy in Mizoram, because the true Israel is not defined by who holds power, but by who holds memory. And that memory is waking up from the four corners of the earth. Think about it, God is not simply restoring territory, he's restoring identity. And identity, real covenant-based identity, is not determined by birth certificate, but by calling. It's happening everywhere, which means something bigger is coming. In the next chapter, we'll explore the mysterious 144,000 mentioned in Revelation, sealed from the tribes of Israel, chosen for the last days, untouched by corruption. Who are they? And could the rediscovered tribes be part of this final remnant? If the lost tribes are returning, what is God preparing them for? Part 5. The sealed ones are the tribes being marked today. In a world obsessed with marks, passports, brands, identities, data, Scripture speaks of a seal not made by man. It's found in the final book of the Bible, Revelation 7. I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from all the tribes of Israel, 12,000 from each tribe. Not metaphor, not poetry, not symbolic theology. It names them tribe by tribe. Judah, Reuben, Gad, Naphtali, Asher, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Manasseh. But one tribe is missing, Dan. As we saw before, Dan's absence in this list is no clerical error. It's a warning that even among the chosen, not all are sealed. So who are these 144,000? Many have speculated. Some say it's symbolic of the global church. Others say it's merely figurative, representing spiritual perfection. But Revelation doesn't leave room for abstraction. It says plainly they are from every tribe of the children of Israel. They are not Gentiles, they are not metaphors, they are Israelites, real, ethnic, tribally identifiable, which leads to a provocative question. If Manasseh is now returning from exile, if Judah is in Israel, if Levi still serves in tradition, then are we even now watching this number being filled? Revelation 14 reveals more. Then I looked, and there before me was the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his father's name written on their foreheads. Revelation 14:1. This seal, this mark, is not a physical tattoo, it's not a barcode, it's not a passport, it is ownership. It means they belong to him. And what kind of people are they? The text tells us, they are blameless. They do not lie. They are pure, untouched by spiritual corruption. And they are called first fruits to God and the Lamb, not leftovers, not latecomers. First fruits. The first to stand in loyalty when the world collapses into compromise. This is not about legalism, it's about allegiance. The 144,000 are not perfect because they try harder. They are sealed because they were found faithful, even when no one else believed, even when the world offered easier paths, even when silence seemed safer than truth. These are the ones who never gave up their name, even when the world tried to rename them, erase them, exile them. Sound familiar? It should. Because that's exactly what the world tried to do to Manasseh, and to every other tribe now waking up. But here's the deeper mystery. The Book of Revelation places the 144,000 before the Great Tribulation, sealed for protection, set apart, assigned a purpose. What is that purpose? They are not just survivors, they are witnesses. While the world burns, they sing a song that only they can learn, a song of redemption, a song of loyalty, a song that traces back through millennia of persecution, wilderness, and waiting. They are not hiding. They are standing with the Lamb on Mount Zion, unshaken. Some will argue this must be symbolic, the tribes are gone, the genealogies are lost. But what if they're not? What if God's memory is not as fragile as ours? What if the same God who preserved Noah through the flood, Israel through Egypt, and Elijah through the cave, has also preserved a people scattered and hidden for such a time as this? What if every tribe listed in Revelation is being restored before our eyes? DNA can't always tell the whole story. Politics certainly won't. But faith leaves fingerprints on generations. You'll find them in Ethiopia, in Mizoram, in Nigeria, in Brazil, in the Kaifong descendants of China. And if these awakenings aren't coincidence, if the tribes are returning from every direction as Isaiah foretold, then maybe, just maybe, the 144,000 are not far away. Maybe the list is almost complete, and maybe you know someone on it. Because this is the real distinction. It's not just about bloodline, it's about loyalty. It's not about appearance, it's about allegiance. God is not sealing people for their ancestry alone, but for their faithfulness. But prophecy doesn't unfold without pressure. In the next chapter, we'll see how the story of Manasseh faces a brutal modern test when violence breaks out in India and their faith is thrown into the fire. Because when prophecy accelerates, so does the resistance. Part 6. The Fire and the Promise, 2023 in Mizoram. Prophecy doesn't unfold in comfort. It often awakens in fire. In 2023, that fire came not in metaphor, but in smoke and blood to the hills of Mizoram and Manipur, home to the Bene Manasseh. It started, like many other conflicts, a political protest, ethnic tension, a land dispute. But quickly something deeper surfaced, a spiritual hostility masquerading as civil unrest. Homes were torched, churches were burned, Entire villages were swept into chaos. But this time it wasn't just an attack on people, it was an attack on memory. For the Bnei Manasseh, a people who had survived 200 to 700 years of exile, wandering, and forgetfulness, this was more than another tragedy. It was a threat to the very thing they had preserved for millennia: identity, covenant, continuity. The fires consumed not just walls and roofs, but sacred artifacts, handwritten genealogies, ceremonial garments, songs, traditions, and stories passed down orally from generation to generation. Things they had never written down, because they never had to. Now they were vanishing in flame and ash. In a world that reacts instantly to global events, the silence surrounding this persecution was deafening. There were no headlines, no hashtags, no outcry. A people long ignored was now being erased again, this time not by exile, but by indifference. But here's the twist. The Bible had already spoken. Only if these decrees vanish from my sight, declares the Lord, will Israel ever cease being a nation before me. Jeremiah 31:36. God was not surprised by the fire. He foretold it not as a punishment, but as a test, because a covenant that cannot endure pressure is no covenant at all. Let's pause and see this clearly. The Bnei Manasseh did not seek war. They didn't provoke hostility. They lived quietly in the forests, keeping the Sabbath, reciting prayers, raising families, waiting patiently for the promise of return. But in 2023, it was as if the spirit of Pharaoh had risen again, seeking to crush what could not be controlled. And just like in Egypt, the pressure didn't destroy the covenant people. It revealed them. What does it mean when prophecy bleeds into news headlines? What does it mean when revelation steps out of the Bible and into a burning home? It means the scroll is being unsealed. It means the time of comfortable Christianity is ending. It means the true sons and daughters of the covenant, those who know who they are even without a temple, even without a scroll, even without global recognition, are being tested in the fire. And only the purest faith survives the flame. Some say the modern return of Israel is political. Some say the scattered tribes are a historical footnote. But then a fire breaks out in Mizraim, and the forgotten tribe does something extraordinary. They do not retaliate. They do not abandon their faith. They rebuild, they regroup, and they continue to sing the same songs, now surrounded by ashes. Like the 3 Hebrews in Babylon, they walk through the fire, but they are not consumed. Why? Because the promise still stands. And that promise was never written on paper. It was etched in the soul of a people who refused to forget. This is where prophecy meets reality. The tribe is real. The return is happening. The persecution is accelerating. And that means we are moving into a new chapter of history, one where the timeline is no longer theoretical. The pages are turning fast. So ask yourself, if God allowed the tribe of Manasseh to pass through empires, deserts, exile, and now fire, and they still remember him, what excuse do we have when we forget after a single generation of comfort? If prophecy is being fulfilled in the hills of Mizraim, why are we still waiting for signs? What else needs to burn before we believe that the Bible is not just a book of the past, but a mirror of now? When the world forgets, prophecy remembers. And when the world closes its eyes, God opens a seal. In the next chapter, we'll explore why the return of Manasseh is more than an historical curiosity. It's a key part of the end-time plan. Because if a tribe long lost is now standing at the edge of Israel's destiny, then what role will they play in the days to come? Because when the promise is tested by fire, only true faith survives. Part 7. The Last Witnesses. Manasseh and the End of the Age. In every generation, God raises a remnant, not the loudest, not the largest, but the most loyal. And in the final pages of Scripture, when the world begins to unravel and the nations rage, one group stands beside the Lamb on Mount Zion, not in fear, not in hiding, but in unwavering faith. They are described in Revelation 14 as those who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. This is not casual faith. This is not Sunday belief. This is total allegiance. And among these followers, the 144,000, the tribe of Manasseh, is named, not because they built empires, not because they conquered lands, but because they remembered when the world forgot. Let's stop and see what this really means. Manasseh was never the center of Israel's story. They weren't the tribe of kings like Judah or priests like Levi. They were the quiet ones. The tribe given a double portion by Jacob, yet overshadowed by their younger brother Ephraim. The ones scattered farthest in exile. The ones most likely to be erased, and yet the ones God chose to seal in the final hour. Why? Because they never broke covenant. In the chaos of the end times, when truth collapses, when nations fall, when even the elect are tempted, the Bible says a group will remain blameless, pure, and untouched by deceit. Revelation 14:4 calls them first fruits to God and to the Lamb. They are the beginning of the final harvest. They are the standard, the evidence that faith can survive not only fire, but silence. And when the Lamb moves, they follow. Not because it's convenient, not because it's safe, but because it's who they are. Could Manasseh be among these last witnesses? Everything about their story points to it. A tribe lost for 200 to 700 years and yet remembered by God. A people without scrolls and yet keeping the Sabbath. A lineage almost forgotten and yet preserved across jungles, empires, and persecution. A community unarmed, unrecognized, and yet undeterred. They are not powerful in numbers, but they are mighty in faith, and that's what heaven counts. You see, in the end, the final battle is not between nations, but between allegiance and compromise. The book of Revelation doesn't celebrate armies. It honors witnesses. Those who did not love their lives even unto death. Those who kept the commandments of God and held to the testimony of Jesus. This is the legacy of the sealed ones. This is the path of Manasseh. And it's not over. Many believe prophecy is something you read, but prophecy is something you live. It unfolds in real people, in real places, in Ethiopian villages, Indian mountains, Nigerian prayer houses, Chinese alleys, Latin American farms. Wherever there is obedience, there is a witness. And perhaps the greatest twist of all is that the tribes we forgot may be the very ones God uses to finish the story. There is one more detail in Revelation 14 that often goes unnoticed. It says the 144,000 sing a new song that no one else can learn. Why can't others sing it? Because they didn't walk through exile. They didn't carry covenant through the fire. They didn't wait for 27 centuries with no temple, no priest, no recognition. Only the ones who endured can sing that song. It's a melody not of melody, but of memory. Not of performance, but of perseverance. And Manasseh may already be rehearsing it. So now we ask, if God has preserved them for this long, could he be preparing them for something greater? If the world forgot their name, but God kept it written, what does that say about every believer who feels invisible today? If a tribe that no one counted is now standing at the edge of the end-time harvest, then what is God about to do? This is not just their story, it's ours too. Because if God can remember Manasseh, if he can hold on to a people scattered across 5 nations and 27 centuries, then what makes you think he's forgotten you? In the next chapter, we go deeper beyond history, beyond geography, into the true meaning of restoration. We'll uncover how the return of Manasseh reveals the heart of God and what that means for your future. Because prophecy isn't just about events, it's about a God who keeps his promises, even when no one else does. If God didn't forget Manasseh, he hasn't forgotten you. Part 8. More than a return, a God who remembers. The return of Manasseh is not just a historical headline, it's not just a geopolitical curiosity. It is the echo of something ancient and yet more relevant than ever. It's a message that has crossed 700 years, a message that outlasted kingdoms, empires, ideologies, and silence. And it's not a message about geography, it's a message about the heart. When Ezekiel looked out over the dry bones in his vision, he didn't just see a scattered people. He saw a people without breath, without hope, without memory. But then God spoke, "I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh." Ezekiel 36:26. This is the true restoration, not just land, not just language, but life breathed into forgotten places. That's what the story of Manasseh really is. Not the return of a tribe to a plot of land, but the return of a promise to the soul of a people. A tribe lost to maps, but not to God. A faith nearly drowned in centuries of silence, but still whispering the name of Yahweh. A story buried beneath jungles, empires, and neglect, but now rising again, not with armies, but with witnesses. This is what makes biblical prophecy unlike anything else in literature or religion. Because God doesn't just predict, He remembers. He remembers names no one speaks anymore. He remembers prayers said in the dark. He remembers covenants made before kingdoms even existed. And just when the world says, "It's too late, they're too far gone," that part of the story is over. God steps in and says, "Watch me." If the return of Manasseh tells us anything, it's this: God is not finished. Not with them, not with you, not with this world. And the greatest miracle isn't that they found their way back. The miracle is that God never lost sight of them. Even when they passed through Persia, through Tibet, through Burma, through the misty hills of India, even when they were unrecognized by nations, scholars, and powers, they were still remembered in heaven. Why does that matter? Because many today feel the same way. Forgotten, overlooked, pushed to the edge of history. Like their prayers no longer move heaven. Like their story no longer matters. But the return of Manasseh is living proof that memory lives longer than exile. And God's promises age better than kingdoms. He is not a God who abandons covenants. He is a God who fulfills them even after 700 years. You may have given up on your faith. You may think your time is past, that too much damage has been done, too much silence, too much distance. But remember this: if God can guard a scattered tribe in the jungles of northeast India for nearly 3 millennia, if He can preserve their identity without scrolls, without synagogues, without global support, then surely He can preserve you. Surely your name has not been erased from His hand. This is more than encouragement. It's proof. Manasseh is not a symbol. They are a sign. A sign that the God of Abraham still watches over His people even when the world thinks they're gone. A sign that He still seals His faithful ones even when the world stops counting them. A sign that when His Spirit moves even through forgotten jungles, prophecy comes alive. And maybe this story found you not by chance, but because you needed to remember that you too are remembered. Maybe the reason you're still breathing, still watching, still listening is because your name is still part of the story. Not an ending, but a return. So let the world forget. Let the world erase, rewrite, and silence. But let those with ears to hear remember God is not finished. And if He never forgot Manasseh, He will not forget you. Because next we speak directly to those who've carried the faith the longest, the elders, the grandparents, the generation that endured. You may not have realized it, but you've been carrying prophecy in your bones. Because just like Manasseh, you were never lost, only planted for the right time. For those who've endured. The story of Manasseh isn't just about prophecy, it's about perseverance through silence. A people nearly erased, yet remembered by God. Their return after 700 years reminds us God's promises are not bound by time, and neither is your purpose. For older generations who feel forgotten or sidelined, this story speaks directly to you. You who have carried faith through shifting cultures, who've prayed through seasons of spiritual drought, who've watched the world move on you, are not overlooked. You are the living bridge between what God began and what He is finishing. Just as Manasseh was sealed for the end, perhaps your endurance is part of a larger preparation, not to retire into silence, but to rise as a witness. The quiet faith you've carried may be the very thing God uses to awaken the next generation. If he remembered Manasseh, he remembers you. And if he preserved them without a temple, he can still use you without a spotlight. Because in God's kingdom, the faithful aren't forgotten, they are first fruits.